Before we dive into today's episode, I've got to tell you about my personal journey with Munn Avenue Press. As an author myself, I've experienced firsthand their magic in turning books into bestsellers. They empower aspiring authors, giving voices like mine the platform they deserve. If you've got a story to tell and a dream, Munn Avenue Press is the ally you need to publish and market your book. Visit them at munnavenuepress.com. That's MUNN avenuepress.com to start your publishing journey, just like I did. Welcome, Season Sixers. As always, thank you for being part of our Color Success podcast family. I'm your favorite host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Keep your eyes peeled for my brand new book coming out. It's called Cancel the Filter, where I share my experiences in the realm of mental health, both professionally and personally. Subscribe to colorsuccesspodcast.com to be on our waiting list. Seats are limited and being filled as we speak. We're also streaming on all your favorite platforms and socials. Whether you're on the go or comfy on the couch, you can tune in at your own comfort. As you know, we love growing discussions with our guests from our AAPI and minority communities. With so many friends and experts from different aspects of life, we love learning their stories and understanding what their success means to them. Let's get into it. I have a very special guest today. Eleanor Tomczyk is a memoirist and humorous blogger whose work features the musings of an African-American baby boomer and ex-evangelical conservative Christian. Say that 5 times. Not many authors can begin a book with words such as, I was born in a toilet, and end a book with the words, I am somebody because my life has proven that love, grace, restoration, hope, and joy can be found if we don't let the monsters kill us, if we don't let them define us. In her mid-70s, the mother, grandmother, and wife of 45 years has published 3 books, Monsters Throwdown, Fleeing Oz, and the Fetus Chronicles, podcast for my miseducated self, and will be releasing her 4th book, House of Oz, Undone, in the fall of 2024 with one of my favorite people, but we'll leave it up to Eleanor to talk about. The fabulous Eleanor Tomczyk, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Thank you. I'm so excited about doing this with you. Ever since I first was introduced to you by our mutual publisher, I've been telling everybody about you.
Hopefully good things, Charlie. I hope you're not, you said the good things, not the stressed out things, though. That's all part of the package, though.
Oh, definitely.
We have so much to unpack, and I mean, you are just amazing, and we talked off camera before we did the interview, and so we have so many places to go with this interview. Thinking about your childhood, your experiences, particularly with your mother's mental health issues, how did that shape you as a person?
Wow, that's a loaded question. We got about 3 hours.
We're going to get into it.
Oh, well, for your audience, my mother was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic. And this was in the 1950s. And few people were being clinically diagnosed with much, and certainly not within the Black community. Mm-hmm. So as one of my relatives said about my mother, what, she was crazy? We're all crazy. Have you seen our lives? That type of thing. And so I look back now on her life and my life, and I realize when I was born to her, she was in the throes of that already, but she hid it very well. I guess they all hid it because everyone I knew grew up in extreme poverty, and this is before the civil rights movement. So horrid racism. It was just an awful time. Mm-hmm. The days were bleak and horrid as far as poverty was concerned, and lack of a good education, lack of an education, no matter how talented or smart you were. And as to how her mental illness shaped me, I just knew I didn't want the life that gave her. That at first I thought it was her personal choices. I didn't understand. And I thought as a child, you abandoned me, you abused me, you did all these things. And it wasn't until I was in my 30s before I actually forgave her, because I actually understood what was the demons that were driving her, and the horrible hurt that had been visited upon her. So one of the things that I used to always see in her mental illness episodes, she would literally go into a comatose stage, when she didn't want to deal with life, and she would moan and cry. And I became the type of child and individual that said, I will never cry. I
Mm.
will never let you break me, whoever the you are. If you tell me no, then I will go yes. And I suppose in a way that was a great thing. Now there are parts of that can be, I had to break down and work through as being a caring partner and a caring mother and a caring friend, because you can't always go around, you know, with your arms up in the air. What's that old phrase? Your arms are too short to box with God, with constantly boxing with everyone, including God, about your life. So I think that's probably what it was. I just wanted to be the opposite of.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about what makes a person um, believe the definition that others have given them, including your own parents, is when that definition is, you are, what were you made for, as Billie Eilish says in that beautiful song. What were you made for? And their response to you is not much. And I always wanted my response to be, not this. I don't know what it is, but not this.
Yeah.
So I hope that's
That was a lot,
explains
and
it.
you gave me a loaded answer, which is perfect because we're going to talk more about this. But I see that saying of like, oh, have a stiff upper lip, and
Hmm.
it was more of survival mode that you're describing, though, this defensive protective shell to really move past some of these circumstances. And you know obviously even now in ethnic minority communities,
Yes.
psychosis, schizophrenia is not well understood, or even in
No.
the general public, but not well understood. It is kind of like, well, they're the crazy uncle or the crazy
Yep.
relative,
Yep.
and that it is what it is, sorts of situations. And um, but the impact that it has not only on the individual, but the children, is very hard because you're not seeing that role model of healthy emotional regulation. And so you bring that into other relationships. And as you mentioned, you have a wonderful marriage, you have children, you have grandchildren, and they also have to see that we're not indestructible, that we're human too, and that we get sad. And sometimes that means crying. I mean, I cried yesterday. So, I do think my husband's like, you always say it's a superpower, but there is this societal expectation that when you cry, you're the emotional, hysterical woman, when
Hmm.
really it's like, we are carrying so much every single day. And your story is an example of just how early it started. Let me take it back 1 second, though, because your book starts with, I was born in a toilet.
Right.
Explain that a little bit more. I mean, I get it. I get the sentence, but
Literally, I was literally, that's not a figurative statement.
right.
Uh, my mother was not married, had been married. I didn't know that at the time. Well, later on, I didn't know that. But she was sleeping with a married man.
Hmm.
And remember, even within the inner city, that was still taboo. You just,
Hmm.
you know, and divorced women were considered lower than the average person. And so she got pregnant, but she was also uh, schizophrenic at that time, and she could decide what persona she wanted to put on and when. And so she told everyone that she had a tumor. Now
Oh, wow.
she's very tiny, and what I was told many years later was that she carried that pregnancy well. So she just showed just a little bit, I guess, and people kind of believed her. And one day, my older sister, stepsister, who was 15, who, by the way, I only met twice, and I only found out about her when I was age 10. And the second time I saw this older sister was at my mother's funeral when my mother was 70 years old. And that's when I got all of the pieces put together from her perspective. So, for just to step back for a minute, I thought I was the oldest child that my mother had. And then my sister comes about 2.5 years later. So, my stepsister said she was 15 and came home, and my mother was groaning in the bathroom. And actually just screaming, and she went into the bathroom to see what was wrong, and my mother had gone to the bathroom and passed me into the toilet, and my 15-year-old stepsister rescued me. I don't even know how she knew what to do. Rescued me, and called my aunt, my mother's sister, who lived down the street, to come to help. um, and if you see my birth certificate, I mean, the birth certificate got filed ages after I was born.
Mm.
So I guess finally a doctor was called in. And it's very interesting that when my mother used to tell me about my life, she would say, "Oh, you were such a baby, a beautiful baby. You were born in the White Hospital, St. Luke's." Well, Black people couldn't go to that hospital anyway. So anyway, you were born there, and the doctors fell in love with you, and uh, two doctors named you. The first doctor named you after Eleanor Roosevelt, and then the second doctor named you after his wife, Lois. Just It was just all bullshit, you know.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so it took me years to swim through all of that garbage. Unfortunately, of the three sisters in the family, two of them were schizophrenics, and literally they became the sisters that wandered the streets in East Cleveland, and they were the crazy sisters that everyone knew about. And one was not mentally ill, but almost a fanatic, a religious fanatic.
Okay.
So she kind of ended up raising all the other sisters' children as they fell through the cracks, until finally she got to me and she couldn't handle me, for all sorts of various reasons. But it's fascinating how much mental illness played in my family. So there were 10 children as part of that family. Three of them were women, four of them were women. One died early on. The rest were men, and they, to the man, I think, became alcoholics. So something awful was happening in that family, and it was visited upon my mother and her sister, and it just went on and on and on and on and on. It stopped with my sister and myself, and I am so grateful for that. Don't know why, but I'm extremely grateful. And this will probably horrify you as a doctor, but for years my sister and I would get together, and we're very close. My baby sister,
Mm-hmm.
and she would say, "Okay, let me look into your eyes. Are you crazy yet?" I would say no, and I'd say, "Well, let me look into your eyes." And that was our way of checking on each other to see if we were forming patterns
Mm.
that her mother had done before us. And I was scared to death for years about having children. I didn't marry until really late, and I did not want to have children. I was afraid that this would pass on.
Mm-hmm. Which
Um,
is a legitimate concern given the
right,
genetic component of it, right? And
right,
I, I, I'm not horrified. I would say, sometimes you have to laugh or you're just going to break down. And
yes,
I think that you and your sister have been a huge support system, not to mention your stepsister who saved your life essentially. And There are certain resilience factors there, though, of you and your baby sister, of being able to, despite this very tumultuous, that's an understatement, childhood and upbringing, you've been able to be there and work through some of these very traumatic experiences. I mean, how many people can say that, about their birth? I mean,
I know.
even at the get-go, it was a huge incident that you almost died, essentially.
Hmm.
If your stepsister hadn't serendipitously come home,
That's right. That's right.
that would have been the end.
And then we eventually, both my sister and I, traveled through the Cleveland. It was kind of a county orphanage, and then through the foster care system, which that's a whole thing in itself. Uh, that was that was the most one. That was the most defining. Those were the most defining times of our lives, and we both chose. I chose first to not believe their definitions of me, and then turned back to my sister and said, "Don't believe the definitions." I don't think I was that sophisticated in my language, but I basically said, "I'm getting out of here, and if you want to be sane, you need to get out of here," meaning Cleveland. It wasn't just the birth, it was the poverty, the
Hmm.
horrid poverty,
I was going to say the intersectionality of it all.
the lack of education. My mother was a very, very smart woman. She wanted to be an opera singer. The other aunt that was considered part of, who was also mentally ill, was a dancer. Um, and all of this, their dreams deferred. No, their dreams blocked.
Hmm.
And you just couldn't be what you weren't supposed to be in the society that they grew up in. So
So, what were the definitions that you were combating or needing to tell yourself, like, I can't give into these things because this is not accurate and I'm not going to play into these definitions?
when I realized I was smart around, maybe I was what, 14, and I found the library. And it was almost like a religious experience. I fell in love. I had no idea. And the main library in Cleveland is just one of those gorgeous, huge buildings. And I got sent there by my teacher. Up until that time, I remember school was just really boring and I was not connecting to it. And I didn't have any black teachers. They were all white teachers and they weren't interested. And I just didn't connect. But she gave us an assignment, I think. She taught us the Dewey Decimal System and said, "Oh, now go take this system and go find a particular book that she gave us to find and bring it back, check it out, get a library card, show this." Greatest thing a teacher has ever taught me. When I walked into that library, I say this in my book, Monsters Throwdown, it was like the heavens opened up and the sun came through the big windows and angels started singing. And I could not believe what an amazing place this was. I had never seen books like that. I don't think my school had a library. I can't remember one. And I started to read. And I, to this day, am obsessed with reading. I mean, you see just this little teeny book thing behind me. There are
Oh,
bookshelves
mine isn't
all over
showing, but
my
I'm
house.
running out of space.
Right.
I want one of
No,
those Beauty and the Beast libraries where you
me
like have a
too.
little,
Me
ladder,
too.
but hey, in the Bay Area, that's like probably $10 million to have that.
Right.
That's
So
not gonna be a
on
thing.
every floor, I have 3 floors, and on every floor there are book shelves like this and bookcases like this. And so I began to read and read and read. And the more I read, the more I learned, the more I learned, the more I realized that there was a world beyond Cleveland. Now remember, this is pre-civil rights days. And so I'm thinking to myself, So I don't know from college. I don't know from any world outside of East Cleveland. I barely go past the dividing line and go into Shaker Heights. I don't know any of this. But I start to learn. And when I started to learn, I got into a learning environment at that point. At that time, the first Black principal was put over a high school, and he had a real vision for Black kids learning. And lo and behold, going to this thing called college that I could barely uh, spell at that point. And I know this is a roundabout way to answer your question, but in doing so, at 16, I was one of the people at the top of my class. And I had won all sorts of awards. And I had, because busing had come in and we had merged schools, I got teachers who taught me Shakespeare and Chaucer and German as a language, and just amazing subjects that I would have never been able to take. And I went to check in at the Cleveland Welfare Office. They called me in and they said, well, you got kicked out of yet another foster home, and we've decided we no longer are going to fund your housing. You're old enough to be able to go and get a job. I got kicked out, by the way, because I was always reading, and I got into trouble because I was reading under my covers and things like that, and not doing enough of the housework that they wanted me to do. And I think I had a sassy mouth that might have done something.
It might have been. Hey.
Yeah, I could cuss like a sailor. So and they said, you have a choice. You can become a domestic, or we can get you a job at the telephone company, because I guess I had learned that skill set. But you are going to get a job and you are going to leave high school, because we gave you a test. They did. That's what they did. They gave me an intelligence test. And in that classroom, when I was taking this test, a kid tried to steal my purse. And I got really upset with him. I got distracted and I got into a fight with him and I flunked the test. So they said, we tested you and your IQ is barely above someone who has a learning disability, and we believe you do. So, the best we can do for you is offer you a chance at employment. And Dr. Wong, I lost it. I just got hysterical, and I threw all my books out of my they didn't call them book bags then, but the satchel kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I said, who in the F gets an A on a Chaucer paper, gets an A for her Shakespeare paper, an A on her German paper, and an A in her algebra paper? Who does that you consider has a learning disability? And I said, I'm not quitting high school. I'm not. And they said, well, you have no choice. And that's a whole different part of the story, because a mentor then comes in and helps me get a job within the school system, within my school.
So
and I was able,
stay.
and I could stay. And I graduated fourth in my class of 341 or 47, something like that.
I mean, I have this face for those who are only listening to audio. My heart is breaking because it's like there's multiple levels here. It's not just questioning your intelligence off of a test that someone was disrupting you, but also just this idea that, well, this kid is hopeless.
Right. And this kid is stupid.
Yeah.
The point is, I think I'd had about, I don't know, I lost count of how many social workers I had. I had one every year. In fact, in the book, I call them all the same name, Miss Perkins. I say, Miss Perkins, number 250. It's no one knew me. Mm-hmm. No one knew how smart I was. And I knew how smart I was. So I think your original question was, what was it that people tried to put on you that you refused to accept? And I think the realization that I was not stupid. Not only was I not stupid, but I was smart.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bold concept for a little kid in the 60s.
And to realize, and the socio-historical context at that time as well. I
Right.
mean, we're still facing the same issues, like, let's not sugarcoat it. But it was definitely, I would say, a lot worse back then. Now, I'm thinking of my colleagues in social work, in psychology, and they're still obviously wonderful professionals in the system that are trying to help children. And some people who are burnt out or just maybe not made for the profession.
Hmm.
What would you have wanted a social worker to do, to ask you in those moments?
You're gonna make me cry.
Miss Perkins
Uh,
281, like, we're talking
Miss
to you.
Perkins, to hear my stories of the abuse that was happening to me in the foster homes and to believe me. I can't even talk about some of those things on your program. It's just not worth it. To open my satchel, my book bag, to see what I was reading.
Mhm.
Um, in fact, to do what my mentor did, who eventually connected with me almost soon after that, and she was the head clerk in the high school that I was going to, and she knew how smart I was, and the principal knew how smart I was. This was a man who had 3,000 children in his school, and he knew us all by name. He would stand at the big front of the door and call us by name.
I
When my
got
sister,
goosebumps. I got goosebumps right there because that is an excellent educator.
right, and when my sister came behind me a few years later, he stopped her in the hallway and he went, "You're Eleanor Smith's sister, aren't you?" And he goes, "She was superb. I expect nothing less from you." And then all it just like, and she still remembers that story. But my mentor began began to see me. I
Mhm.
needed a social worker to see me.
Mhm.
Now, in their defense, I'm sure they didn't have the bandwidth, the time. Most of my social workers were just like still green behind the ears and still their diplomas were still wet and they were almost like interns. That my life was not something that someone who had had a really Pollyanna life could absorb without um, just losing their mind. I'm sure that's why there was such a
Mhm.
turnover. You don't walk into that type of poverty, sexual abuse, mental abuse, physical abuse, and be able to sleep at night. So I understand that now. Uh, but I needed someone to see me, to listen to me, just open their eyes to see me
Mhm.
rather than a stereotype. And fortunately, by God's grace, a mentor came along that was able to do that. And when it came time, and she helped me, along with the guidance counselor, get this amazing full scholarship to a mostly white, all white college. The Cleveland welfare system, to their shame, the Miss Perkins, the boss of Miss Perkins number 200 and whatever, called and really cursed out my mentor, saying, "How dare you put this false hope in this girl? We've tested her. She's not this, she's not that." And basically my mentor said, "Fine, come to graduation when she gets her awards for being number, 4 in her class. Other than that, get out of my face."
That mentor is amazing. And I guess I wonder, even in that context, where do you think your mentor got the strength? Because that takes a lot too, to put yourself in the line of fire, so to speak.
Well, she is still alive. She is 95 years
Ooh, we
old.
should have invited her today.
She she is so feisty. She is so incredible. She's losing her sight. She's losing her hearing. Her mind's still intact. The stories kind of go on a loop, every once in a while. And she has to use a walker. But was she was a Maya Angelou mixed with a kind of a Lena Horne type. She wasn't I don't mean as a musician. She just
Mhm.
had this stateliness to her. And she had wanted to be a nurse, but they would not allow, she wanted to be an RN and they would not allow Black people to become RNs.
Mhm.
So she had gotten into secretarial work and come up through the ranks in the Cleveland school system and become one of the top clerks. And so when this Black principal was given this school that was a multiracial school for a week, that was during busing for a week. After a week, all the white people fled someplace else, and it was an all-Black school. Literally, that's no exaggeration. But he had a half white staff and a half Black staff, and he said, I'll only take this assignment if I can have Maggie Mitchell, who was one of the top
Mhm.
uh, head clerks in the city, and she's awesome. So she taught me really solid um, ground skills as far as getting a job. She said, I'm going to make sure, I don't care what you become, where you go, how you use your education, but I'm going to make sure that you will never starve because these are the skills I'm going to teach you. You're
Mm.
going to become an excellent typist. You're going to an excellent stenographer. You are going to learn how to run an office, and you will drop down into any city and within an hour find a job that will be other than being a maid and scrubbing floors, and so, or working in a diner or whatever. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but she just knew that I could use my intelligence that way and use that as a springboard. And basically, uh even during my all my years of trying to be an actress and a singer, my day job was, okay, here I am taking dictation for this person before I go to an audition.
Mhm.
So she and we talk every week, and she's so proud of me. She calls me her daughter, and she knows that she saved my life.
I was
She
gonna
knows.
say that is mentorship, but also she fulfilled a role for you that was very mother-like too. Like, let me
Totally.
teach you how to not just survive, thrive.
She would take me, once again, early civil rights days, after the civil rights movement, and things started opening up. And even though I lived in Cleveland, please, it was as segregated as can be. And there were places that we couldn't go, uh, things that Black folks couldn't do. And so as these things began to open up by law, she would push the boundaries. So she would take me into these exquisite restaurants and say, all right, I'm going to teach you how to eat properly. This is what you do with your napkin. This is what you do with that fork. This is what you do with that spoon. No, take that gum out of your mouth. You're not a cow. And just things like that. This is what you wear. No, you're much too buxom to wear those tight sweaters. What's something else? And then, so she says, I'm going to make it so that you can walk before kings and queens, and
And
no one will tell you you don't belong there.
and you do. So let's switch gears just a little bit. And you mentioned that you did turn to religion
Mhm.
and to also be kind of the support system as a way to cope. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us more about that. And you got into a cult, you got out of the cult, and kind of what all happened in between.
So, as you can imagine, when I went into college, that was a really, really, really lonely existence for me. because it was an all-white environment. Every second of the day I was trying to play catch up and code switch. How do I manage this? How do I navigate this? Had to deal with a lot of racism. And
For those that don't understand or don't know the term, could you explain code switching?
code switching is like, I think every minority group has it. It's when you're with your own people, you are most relaxed and you can speak a certain way, or there's an understanding. You're watching the same programs, you have a certain street language that you know. But when you go into a completely different environment, and usually it's the white environment, where you have to where what is considered delightful about you and is understood about you in your own amongst your own people can come off, you're being too loud, you're an angry Black woman, you're too abrupt, you just in the way you speak and you carry yourself. So I was always in the position of, when I was within the Black community, because I taught myself how to speak well, I was considered, I would be teased that I was speaking like I was white. When I was in the white community, if I slipped in my language in any way, or didn't, just tried to relax, it was like, oh, well, now you're being ghetto, aren't you? That type of thing. So there's this odd world that we have to
walk the line.
One of the things that I realized, after 4 years of that, and going out into the wide world with my degree, but what was I going to do with it? All of a sudden, it actually happened my senior year when the journey began. All of a sudden, the things that I had not taken care of mentally, my background, all of that, I just kind of had shoved everything underneath and stuffed everything down and kept going. My senior year, what did I read? Even forgot the book that I know. My degree is in opera, and I had to listen to this new rock opera and critique it for my opera class called Jesus Christ Superstar. And by the end of it, I was sobbing uncontrollably on the floor because I realized that there was something about my whole spiritual life that had completely blocked itself off, and that this was calling to a love of a higher power that I had not even thought about. And I say in the book that I had a nervous breakdown, and that was never clinically confirmed, but I just remember uncontrollably crying. I remember, I just the stiff upper lip type of person, and I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. I didn't come out of my room for a couple of days, I think.
I mean, that's 20 plus years of holding it in.
Right? And so somewhere along the line that summer, when I was in a production in Southern Ohio, I really came face to face with my own vulnerability and lack of spirituality, and lack of being connected with something greater than myself. And and I go back to that beautiful Billie Eilish song that
This is why I love you, by the way, is like, you are in the pop culture game. Like, you're just like me. I'm quoting Neo at work, and I'm like,
right.
Anyways,
but what that beautiful line? What was I made for? And that just kept. I guess that's why I connected so much to that song when she wrote when it came out. It's just like, oh my God, there's got to be more than even this, you know. And so I did have a religious conversion, and I did and then realized that I didn't want to spend my life in New York City. I'd moved to New York City by then, trying to become an opera singer, and I just didn't want to stay there and drown and die. I was all alone, no community, uh no friends, and I got involved. I was invited to a community of Christians, um and asked to visit, and then to eventually come and live there. And the reason I gave you that bit of a background is that it didn't start out to be a cult. It's my theory that most groups of people of two or more, if they come together around some common goal, around a common mission statement, uh, I mean, a good one, not a weird one, they don't start out to be a cult. They just have a common mission. And
And a
this was
passion.
yeah, and a passion. And this was at the time when uh, all of the baby boomers who were hippies or of that ilk at that time were really over the whole buzz of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It was just, it had come up empty, and they were looking for something else. And as Time magazine put it, especially when they did an article on these groups, including our group with pictures and everything, it was, they said, if I can remember correctly, that 435 or more groups had started across the country and in Europe because of kids just searching for more. And some of them were around growing vegetables. Some of them were Leche League things. And one of them, a lot of them were religious organizations. And so this started out as just a bunch of hippie kids
looking for meaning.
Looking for meaning. I was one of 2 or 3 Black kids that showed up. And in the beginning, it was wonderful for me. And you know why it was? Because it was family. I had never had a family. So here we were deciding to really bond with each other and have each other's back and support one another and encourage one another. Who could ask for more, right? All in the name of Jesus in that sense. And so 2 things happened in that group before it went off kilter that solidified my healing. And that is, one, that I really opened up in a vulnerable way, in a truthful way, to a group that I felt truly loved me, and I loved them back. And that's a very healing, powerful healing force. And I met my wonderful husband. And he, who I've been married to, I met him 51 years ago, and we've been married for 45. That did it. And he was the ultimate person that really helped me complete my healing journey. So in that respect, I owe that particular group a lot. But as in all groups, when a group decides that the original concepts or tenets that they built the group on are no longer working for a couple of the leaders, and that changes, or your individual input and opinions are not valued, but only the group think is. And if everybody doesn't think in the same way and lockstep in the same way, then they are not a valuable part of the group.
Mm-hmm.
Once the group begins to close in on itself and not let outside review come in, or a
Becomes very
public,
secretive.
yes, that's the word. It becomes very, very secretive. And the rule book that you thought you agreed on, which in my case, our case, was the purity of the gospel, that we were to love each other uh, as we love ourselves, to do unto others as you do uh, to yourself, for yourself. It was when that began to fray and fall apart, um, and they started getting into really odd doctrine, that's when I knew, and my husband knew, that it was time for us to exit stage left.
What was maybe one example of when it started getting weird, so to speak?
Let's see. There was a movement afoot. So you imagine across the country, there are all these hippie kids that became involved in these churches, but they still had their old ways, some of their old ways about them, still kind of wild and crazy. And there were older gentlemen from really staid denominational churches that came on board and offered a more defined and structured course for these particular smaller groups, especially ours, to come into. And if you do some reading on it, it was called the shepherding movement or the discipleship movement. And they really ran it almost like a business. Basically, you can disciple these amount of people, and basically you just tell them how to live. So they can, first of all, they come to you for counseling because you're older, you're wiser, blah 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 blah. But then that kind of, you overstep your boundary by saying, well, meddling in their business,
Mm-hmm.
well, you shouldn't marry so and so, you can marry so and so. It became very, very, very controlling. In the meantime, it looked like a pyramid scheme, of course, because there were all of these minions on the bottom. I was one of them. And then another layer, and then another layer. Everybody reported up to a different higher person, including your money. So
Oh my.
you're tithing, and would go up until the person on the top uh
Profited the
got
most and had the most
profited
power.
the most, yeah, not
Mm-hmm.
only in the money, but also in the power.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you start noticing that the people on the top are not following the rules that they told the people on the bottom to follow, because those rules were very strict, um you if you've got half a brain and half a heart, you go,
This doesn't
something's not
feel
right.
right. Yeah. So what
And
gave you the strength though for you and your husband to pick up and leave? Was there a process, or it was like, oh, this is not going well. Like, let's just leave right now.
no, because first of all, I loved these people and they loved me. We basically left because we had a job. My husband had a job transfer.
Okay.
So that was probably a very, very good thing. Also, I I was always, from my background, one that fought back. So I was constantly in the face of the leaders of that particular organization that I was in, and I would just say, this is awful. This is this way, or this is. I would either not do what they asked me to do or confront it. So once we left and we lived in another country for a few years, and things really started getting more and more and more crazy, we were not part of that. It wasn't until after I came back years later and discovered that this particular organization had morphed into what you now see they're a tiny part of it. What you now see as Christian dominionism, that's part of the whole MAGA movement that is trying to re-elect Mr. Trump. And so
we're a woman of the same heart, basically. And
right.
That is, we have a similar style of calling for accountability. And I think what doesn't sit well with me many times is that then there's like gaslighting going on. Like, no,
Right.
you're crazy, and let me question your
Right.
credibility. So
Right.
how did you build up that strength or find the strength to continue doing that? Because I gotta tell you, Eleanor, it's exhausting. I'm
It is
exhausted.
exhausting. I've lost my best friend whose husband married us, who is the godmother of my children,
Mm.
who one of my children's middle name is after her. I lost her because I said, this is weird. I mean, I can you just kind of like push back here? Can you research this? Can you? And I remember her husband, who I adored, just coming up beside me almost serpentine like and saying, we're into dominionism now. And I'm thinking,
Mm.
what? But that was years ago. I had no idea. I should have stopped, dropped, and rolled and researched, but I didn't. I don't think anybody did. And I went on to do my thing with my husband in another country. And yeah, and as it got worse and worse and worse, I would write her and I would say, and I remember one day I wrote this email, and I said, I'm changing. I'm beginning to question everything that I learned except God Himself. But everything else that was taught to me, I am going to pull it apart, take it down, re-examine it. And if it doesn't hold up to the light of day, I'm throwing it in the trash heap.
Mm.
And I just need you to hear me and to, as my friend, make room for me to grow this way.
You were asking to be seen again.
Yes. And it was at the election of, coming up to the election of Barack Obama. And if you had asked me before then, do the people that you think love you the most within your Christian background, are they racist? I would have said hell to the no. Absolutely not. And I saw a racism that came out of that was couched in, we are doing God's will.
Mm-hmm.
God's will is the Republican candidate. God's will is this or that. And it was all coded, but it had nothing to do with reality or the truth. What was there, what couldn't be seen, what they did refuse to pick up and look at was the racism. And it broke me. It broke me.
What did that look like to be broken?
Betrayed. Really, really betrayed. Because I thought, what did I spend all those years doing? What was I leading people to when I was telling them, there is a God, there is love, there's something beyond us. And fortunately, I got to a place, the more I pulled away from it, it wasn't just a Barack Obama, it was the first time within our group, when we go way back, when AIDS first hit the country. And remember, we were a bunch of hippies who were supposed to love each other and care for each other and whatever. Mm-hmm. And one of our guys was on the down low, and no one knew anything then.
Mm-hmm.
And he was married, and I was already out of the country. And when I came back, he had full-blown AIDS. His body was emaciated and marked and everything. And he was sitting in a wheelchair with his wife off to the side. And when I came back for our visit from our sabbatical, I went up to him and just hugged him. All I knew was that he looked ill.
Yeah.
I guess somebody had whispered something in my ear, but I didn't know anything. I just saw him as the person that I knew and had a heart for, and I enveloped him in my embrace and kissed him, and he said, just with this hopeless voice, I am so surprised you hugged me because no one will even come near me. And I couldn't understand that. That's not the place that had helped save my life. I couldn't even fathom that. And when I talked to my good friend about it, who was the wife of the pastor, it was almost as if her reaction, it was cold.
Mm-hmm.
It was, yeah, he thinks we didn't do right by him, but
Dismissive.
yeah, it was dismissive. It was dismissive. And then out of that, so it wasn't just this particular church, because we went on to move other places and joined different, maybe like 12 different churches after that before I finally said, forget about it. But the churches that we attended always drew us toward them with a promise of community and belonging. Oh, great. You know? And I still remember this church where we were sitting in, all are welcome. You come as you are. That's what Jesus would do. He's just, you be you, and we will love you. And we were sitting in this church one day, the last one, and the minister said, apropos to nothing, got up, hi, I'm pastor, whatever. I'm just want to go on record by telling you that if you're a homosexual, you are, and then began to blah, 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 blah.
Oh my goodies.
And I looked at my husband and I said, what did he just say? And my husband goes, I don't know. I've been doing the crossword puzzle for the last 10 minutes because he was so zoned out. And I said, so all of the half dozen people who are in here that I know are gay suddenly feel like a bunch of garbage.
Mm-hmm.
That this place that they thought they belonged,
Accepting them. Yeah.
oh my God. So I looked at my husband and I said, are we over this? He goes, oh, been over it a long time ago.
And I need another crossword puzzle if we're going to stay. So, how do you, though, still have a belief in a higher power? And, we've talked off camera about taking what was helpful and those basic tenets of love, compassion, community, and leaving the rest behind, because it's really hard, like you said, to feel betrayed, to be in these communities for so long, and then recognize that, maybe this is not the way to connect.
I have had to let go of the corporate structure. I miss corporate worship. I miss being in the midst of people who are singing this the same song in worshiping God. It just gives you chills. Well, when you're in a wonderful church service where there are hundreds of people just singing that type of worship song to God, it's transcendent. So I miss that. I don't miss the politics of it. And I learned to broaden my tent pegs as far as who God is, who he loves. It has no sides anymore, as far as I'm concerned. how I have, for the last 10 or 15 years, more like 15, decided that I would walk the talk and not worry about um, the organized structure of it.
So
So that's how I've done it.
so another thing is, and I'm going to ask point blank because we're both real talk kind of people. How did you not overgeneralize to all white people that they're dangerous, that they are harmful, or even all religious folks? Because you did end up marrying your husband, who you met in this community, and he is a white man.
Hmm. Hmm. I know. Part of it was naivete, but also,
Ooh, let's call him in. No.
but also, I was so hungry for love.
Mm,
And my husband, when he fell in love with me, it was the most exhilarating thing I've ever seen. For the longest time, I didn't even think I could live up to that. And that for the longest time, I was afraid of losing that.
mm,
I figured I wouldn't be good enough in that sense. I had to get over that, because then when you feel that way, then you really are not an equal partner, and you don't, when that person needs smacked upside their head, you don't do what you're supposed to do,
And you
when you don't confront.
self-sabotage.
Yeah, you do. And so that's what did it. That's really, really what did it, was his incredible, incredible love. Um, and that kind of melts away a lot of things if you embrace
Hmm.
that.
Absolutely.
How can you dislike or hate someone that you love so deeply? It's just impossible, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I know that you love, love, love your kids, love, love, love your grandkids. And
Hmm.
so we've also talked about it that you created this with your husband, a very loving, supportive, fun environment. And we've also talked about the therapy piece of your conceptualization was very different than them. Now, your daughter had mentioned, I need to go see a therapist, and it's kind of common speak now, like
Hmm.
which I'm happy about because people really have normalized it a bit more. It's still very stigmatized in many of our communities, but um, how do you see that difference? How did you see this evolution of this perspective on therapy?
They sprang it on me. It just, my husband and I were talking about it the other day. He goes, "What is this?" He said, they just talk about it like it's you know, something that just happens. It's like going to the grocery store. And I remember saying it to one of my daughters. I said, "When did this all happen?" She goes, "Oh, mom, that my entire generation, we all are seeing therapists or want to see a therapist." And I just thought that was the most interesting thing I'd ever heard of,
Hmm.
and especially during the COVID lockdown,
Oh yeah.
that, it was something that they utilized and bragged about, and so it's become, I'm still learning. Part of my situation that when I think about therapy as a Black woman is that as Black women, we have this persona that we're very, very strong,
Hmm.
and we're to shoulder everything, and we're the strong ones. That's just, I don't know how it is in your culture, but it is with Black women. It's just like, we will keep going. You can chop off our legs and our hands, and we will still crawl and try and keep our family functioning and together. So that's a little hard to shake off. Um,
Absolutely.
and and that has to be completely shaken off before you can even understand, oh, maybe I could have used therapy or whatever.
Or I could
And
have used help.
I could have
Yeah.
used help, and it's so much fun watching the shows like Insecure by Issa Rae, it's just like those little girls are like in and out of therapy offices all over the place. And I thought, okay, that's that generation. That's what they do. And yeah, good on them, because in in reality, from my
Mm-hmm.
perspective, every religion, every church, every synagogue, every temple should um, really be a place where people can come and bare their souls, not be judged and not be manipulated and not be bullied, and then be able to receive the help they need.
Mm-hmm.
I think
And
that it should come out of those religious centers. How powerful would that be? But it usually gets messed up and you don't get it. I'm not saying that all therapists are great either, because I have some friends who've had therapy, and let's just say I would not have
yeah.
taken that advice.
Not all providers, not even therapists are great. You really have to find the ones that work for you and are you're able to be comfortable with and create a space of healing
Hmm.
is what we're really talking about, no matter what the forum.
Hmm.
So obviously we could talk all day. I know I can, but where can people continue to learn about the whole history of your stories? We just scratched the surface. And purchase your books, and what can we anticipate in the next book?
Thank you for asking. My website is eleanortomczyk.com. And
Link in the bio.
yes, and I have you can find my books on Amazon, of course, and all three of them, which is Monsters Throwdown and Fleeing Oz, which is all about the churches that I did end up fleeing, and the Fetus Chronicles, of course. And I also have a political blog that I write. Used to be once a week, but now it's kind of on hiatus while I finish off my fourth book. But my blog is how the hell did I end up here.wordpress.com, which actually
I love it.
which actually came out of leaving the church,
Mhm.
Um, and the new book that's coming out from in September, hopefully the day after Labor Day, because I want to get it out before the elections happen. It's called House of Oz Undone, a just a I don't know what subtitle I'm going to put with it yet, but it is called The House of Oz Undone. And that basically is a reimagining of the Wizard of Oz regarding the role that evangelical Christians are playing in the support and the potential reelection of Donald Trump. I can't wrap my brain around Jesus is love, Jesus is mercy, Jesus is grace, Jesus is hope, and the actions of this particular character, and that 80% of evangelicals are in the pocket for him, can't do it, can't handle it. And so my thoughts about the whole subject for the last 2 years uh, are in this reimagining of the Wizard of Oz. And I can I just read you this one little thing?
Oh, please.
uh, 2.5 years ago, I wrote a manifestation, and I said, I want to write a book, preferably my next one, that is so widely read and seen that it breaks the Talibanic stronghold in evangelical Christianity, kind of like Uncle Tom's Cabin, where the author really was accused of starting the Civil War because of the truth that she brought to the brutality and the sin of slavery. And I want to set women and men's hearts free to live transformative lives of true love, freedom, mercy, grace, and truth. And then I put P.S. God, please hurry. I'm already 73, not much time left.
Oh, well, this has been absolute joy for me. And I know that we're going to continue being friends. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. Thank you.
I am so excited to announce that my book, Cancel the Filter, Realities of a Psychologist, Podcaster, and Working Mother of Color, is now available on Amazon through Kindle or a paperback copy. So get yours today. The link is in the description.